Section 11.1, Variation within populations. Section 11.1, Variation within populations. Genetic variation in a population increases the chance that some individuals will survive. If populations have a wide range of phenotypes, natural selection would be acting on those different phenotypes. The more variation in the phenotypes, the more likely some organisms will be able to adapt to their environment and survive, having offspring and keeping the species strong. Genetic variation is stored in the population's gene pool. Remember, gene pool is the combined alleles of all the individuals in a population, or all of the alleles in a population. Different combinations come or arise from the result of reproduction. Allele frequency is a measure of how common an allele is in a population. It's a math ratio here, the number of times an allele occurs divided by the total number of alleles in the population. In this example, if we're talking about the entire gene pool here, and you count all the letters up there, both the big B and the little b, there'll be 30 total alleles. If we're trying to calculate the frequency of allele B, we'd count up all the capital B's, and counting them up, we get 17. Calculating the frequency of allele little b would be 13, or the number would be 13. When you do the actual math problem on it, so this would be 17 divided by 30, we're going to get approximately 57% as our allele frequency. And for lowercase b, we're going to get 13 divided by 30, so we're getting approximately 43%. Notice that these percentages add up to 100 because we're talking about all of the alleles in the gene pool.
In this example, if we're counting up all the alleles in this population, we're going to 2, 4, 6, 7, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 alleles total. So 18 is total. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 uppercase. So 13 and 18 is approximately 72%. If there's 18 other things, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lowercase, and 5 times 18 is approximately 28% for the lowercase, and makes sense in this example. Again, both these add up to 100%.
Okay, so this one we're just trying to reason out what's going on here. It says if the brown skin color became advantageous, meaning it would be beneficial for survival, what would likely happen to the frequencies of the alleles uppercase G and lowercase g in this gene pool? Well, if you notice, the uppercase G is dominant, so that's going to be expressed more often. If somehow the green skin color became less advantageous for this environment, then what would happen would be there would be an increase in the brown skin color, meaning that little g's frequency would increase. Genetic variation comes from several sources. The first would be mutations. Mutations are random changes in the DNA of a gene. These changes can form new alleles. The second would be recombination. Recombination forms new allele combinations during meiosis, the type of cell division where gametes are produced. When gametes are made, each parent's alleles are arranged in new ways. So you get, remember, many different possibilities in humans. It's 10 to the 23rd power different arrangements of chromosomes in a gamete. So you're getting a bunch of different genetic combinations. And lastly is hybridization, where different species that share common genes could crossbreed and produce offspring, and this would also cause genetic variation. So again, mutations, random changes in DNA forming new alleles. Mutations in reproductive cells are passed to offspring. If they're passed to the offspring, it's going to increase variation in that species. If there are mutations in body cells or somatic cells, those are not passed on to the offspring. Those stay within that organism. Second source, recombination. Okay, new allele combinations formed during meiosis. This is demonstrating crossing over, which is, okay, here the homologous chromosomes are crossing over and then reattaching, and we get a recombination here, but also in how they line up during metaphase of meiosis produces many, many, many different combinations of alleles. Lastly, hybridization, crossing of two different species that share common genes. This is going to add new genes to the gene pool. So it's showing here coyotes and gray wolf producing the red wolf. Okay, another hybridization is a donkey and a horse producing a mule. And lastly, a lion and a tiger producing what's called a liger. 11.2, natural selection in populations. Natural selection acts on the distribution of alleles. For certain traits, all phenotypes provide an equal chance of survival. For others, phenotypes near the middle are more common and the extremes are less common. If a normal distribution, remember normal distribution is shaped like a bell-shaped curve. This is just something to talk about in statistics, which means these guys in the middle here would have the highest number of alleles, and these on the end, the outliers or the extremes, would have less genes or less alleles in that particular gene pool. If the environment changes, however, certain phenotypes may become advantageous. If they're advantageous, that allele is going to come up in a higher frequency in that population. Natural selection can change the distribution of traits in three separate ways. First one is microevolution. This is the observable change in the allele frequencies of a population over time. Small changes in a species over several generations can be caused by natural selection. This can change the distribution of a trait along one of three paths: directional, stabilizing, or disruptive selection. This first type of selection, called directional selection, what this means is it favors the phenotypes at one extreme, meaning one end of our bell-shaped curve. This causes a shift in a population's phenotypic distribution, and a once rare phenotype becomes more common. If this was the original population, and it's shown here as a dotted line, which I'm now making red. Ew, that's kind of ugly. So again, this dotted line, which I'm now making red. Okay, if this is the original population, and this directional selection is saying that the organisms that have the phenotype on this end of it are favored, meaning this end of it are selected against the gene pool, the whole population is going to shift to the right. So now this is going to be the alleles. Notice the ones that were here have moved to the right. It's been selected towards an extreme, towards the right side. The second type of selection is called stabilizing selection. In stabilizing selection, the intermediate or the average phenotype is the one favored, and because of this, it becomes more population. The allele frequency becomes stable at the intermediate phenotype. The extremes decrease where the intermediate or the average size increases. So again, in this example, this is the original population, and in this case, both sides are being selected against, and the alleles in the middle, this would be the favorable trait, and so our curve is going to look quite a bit different. Now it's getting narrower and taller because we're losing the extremes on both ends. So this example is from page 636 in your book. It says, what type of selection would occur if only the woodpeckers are putting pressure on the gall flies? So in this example, the woodpeckers are putting pressure on this side, which would be, as it says here, the larger gall fly size. So if the woodpeckers are eating the larger gall flies, that would mean these larger size would be selected against, and our graph would move this way. Okay, and this is what type of selection? This is called directional selection. Okay, so this is directional. and the graph would look like that. The dashed line is being used as the original or the normal distribution of alleles before environmental pressures on this population. According to this example from the book, where it's getting pressure from both sides, both the wasp eating the small size and the woodpeckers eating the large size gall flies, what type of survival is this? This is stabilizing survival, and the intermediate size, or this middle size, notice we're getting more middle, would be what would be surviving the best, the intermediate or average size gall fly. Our last type of selection is called disruptive selection. Disruptive selection, both extreme phenotypes are favored and the intermediate phenotypes are selected against. So if the middle is being selected against, meaning this area is being selected against, it's going to move the graph out in both directions and the middle down. So you end up getting this shape of the graph where we have the extreme to the left being selected, the middle being selected against, and the extreme to the right being selected. So you're getting a graph that looks something like that.